Welcome everyone to our AMA. It's a little different time, and this is April 1st, but this is real. As far as I know, there's no April Fool's jokes involved with this AMA. So thank you for coming. And today we're going to be joined by, or we are joined by John and Brandon from the Manna team. Manna is a really interesting project that has the goal of distributing a UBI to everyone on Earth. So I think that's a wonderful goal, and we love Manna here at BrightID. And I'll let them tell us more about it. And if anyone has questions, you can always raise your hand, and we'll get to you when there's a break, or you can type your questions into the chat. So with that, which of you wants to go first, John or
I'll
Brandon?
go ahead and go
Okay.
first, and Brandon in.
All right, take it away, John. Really glad to have you.
Yeah, so I'm John Freshen. It looks like there's a Q at the end of my name, but just FYI, it's not really the end of my name. Anyways, Manna started roughly the version that closer to what we see now in around 2017. We launched a website called Mannabase.com, and we started accepting users with a few different requirements. The objective being that if you verified as a unique person, you'd start receiving a regular amount of Manna. And this was done on a blockchain that was pretty similar to Bitcoin. We had a really good amount of growth and success over the first 4 or 5 months. And at the same time, we started to encounter a huge number of issues. We had a lot of real users, but then we also started to have an enormous amount of fake users. And even though Manna at the time was not worth a huge amount, even being worth a small amount, people were willing to take massive steps to try and beat the system to get it. So it was kind of a mixed bag of being really excited to see maybe the first stage in this vision of a currency that's distributed to everybody, but also seeing all the problems and difficulties in actually accomplishing that. And that even though we, with blockchain technology and some of these cool new evolutions in tech, that we had started to have this as a possibility, that we weren't really quite there yet. So we needed to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to fix the Sybil problem, and also how to improve the technology to be more scalable and accessible. So we ended up meeting with Adam. He was a kind of a mutual person we knew in the space, working on Swift Demand and other things. And he also recognized the issues very clearly with Sybil attacks. And soon we came to the conclusion BrightID was the best and really only option for us to actually make something like Manna a reality. At that point, we decided to launch our new chain, or the new token on ID chain, which is, if some of you may know, associated with BrightID. It's kind of the core developers of BrightID developed it, and there's a lot of crossover there. And now we recently launched Manna 2.0, where users can once again start to claim Manna, 1 per day, and they just need to have a verified BrightID with meets verification, and at this point also a B2 certification of 1, and you can start getting the Manna. And from there, we're now trying to start building out the ecosystem of what you can actually do with it, and how to empower our community to start building on top of maybe this core infrastructure to make it something far more beyond what we've envisioned, and more so what a lot of other creative and amazing people can make this become. So anything you have to add to that, Brandon?
Yeah, sure. I'm Brandon Vanetta. So yeah, the only thing I would like to add is just like we're trying to make it simple and accessible to all. Like it's pretty complicated to get started in the space, so we hope to be a tool to get this moving into everybody. So we're grateful to be part of the BrightID community, and there's a lot of challenges ahead, but this problem of what BrightID is trying to solve is a really big problem. especially as the internet and Web3 continues to evolve forward. So we're grateful for everyone that's been on this journey with us from the beginning, and we'll continue moving all this forward. So thanks for having us. So I'll give it back to you, John, there to get started.
Yeah, I guess we're happy to start answering some questions now.
I think let's focus in on some of those questions that we received from the Mana community on the BrightID, some of the why we're using BrightID. Do you mind going through some of that list there, John? And then we can start engaging with some of the core team of BrightID.
I think there's probably a question that's maybe a little more broad that'd be great to answer first, and then one that would be a little more specific. So people kind of, one of the questions we get from users is, why do I need to use a BrightID? This is, you know, an app for many of our users they've never used before. Of course, it's a new and nascent project, so a lot of people haven't used it. And that's a common question of, why do I need this? Why can't we just use something else? And maybe you guys can give us an answer for our community for really why BrightID is so special and what makes it unique, and why maybe some of the other alternatives don't really quite provide what we need, and what a lot of other projects that are using BrightID need.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So someone asked, someone said, I'm already BrightID verified, so why am I not verified for Mana? Mana is the first project to use a new verification method called B2. It's spelled B-I-T-U. And people are asking, okay, well, I went to the connection party and I got BrightID verified, so what is B2 and what do I need to do? And that's a really good question. So B2 is based on, it's kind of a slower moving, more organic way of getting verified. And there's no real shortcuts. And I think that's the thing that's frustrating to people, is that there's no prescribed way like there is in the meets verification, where you can go and say, okay, I went to the BrightID meet, I got BrightID verified, I'm good to go. With B2, the best recommendation that I found, because I've seen people that went from having zero, a B2 score of 0 to a B2 score of 10 or so within a couple of months. And what they did was they basically made new friends, and that's kind of that's basically the way that you're going to get B2 verified if you currently have a B2 score of 0 is either you yourself or someone that you already know is going to make some new friends in the space. And that's not, making friends is not a snap your fingers type process. So in the examples that I know of, there's certain communities. I'll give an example. There's a community called Song a Day, which is a really fun, interesting community. It follows Jonathan Mann, who makes a song a day. And the example that I'm thinking of, there's someone who met him, started working with him, got really interested in his project, met some BrightID folks through that. Jonathan himself has a pretty high B2 verification score just from having met people within BrightID. And so by getting to know him, getting to know his community, this person got a high B2 score. So you can kind of see the connection there. It can be meeting someone else that has, already knowing someone else who has done what I just said, or being that person yourself who has done what I just said. And there's several communities. I'll just name a few. There's the Gitcoin community. There's Song a Day. There's Manna. Although maybe John and Brandon can talk about ways to get more involved in Manna than just being like someone who gets Manna. But if you become someone who maybe is a volunteer or does some work on Manna, that might be a way to get B2 verified. Some other communities that I know of are Rabbit Hole. Basically, you can look at the apps, and you can also look at some of the DAOs or some of the I guess decentralized communities that are using BrightID in their community. So Giveth, let's see, the Token Engineering Commons. So you can you basically right now the kind of thing that makes it tricky is not everyone in the world is interested in these things or already like getting involved in these communities that already use BrightID. And so that's why it's a slow process. And in some cases it can be a very slow process. And that's frustrating for people. But I'll go ahead and let you guys talk more about that.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. So like going back to why, and anyone that's been with us for a while, understand that like what we tried to do with the verification of multiple accounts was an email, a phone, SMS text, and then we saw how broken that process or in CAPTCHA. So that like was working okay, and then all of a sudden just got nailed with Sybil's. And it is remarkable from the back end side to see a Sybil attack occur. It's actually like when it first started happening, it's kind of frightening to see and how quickly it occurs. So then you start looking into solutions, right? And the immediate one is like, ooh, government ID and all that and KYC. But then you get into data collection. You're holding personal data of people. That's a problem, and we don't want to do that. So then you look at, okay, what is the other? And there's not a solution. Like this is why BrightID exists, is to be that non-invasive, try to find a unique person in the social web and identify those accounts. So that's essentially why. If there becomes a better solution and things develop from there, we're here for the long haul, right? So, and BrightID is too. Like BrightID just sees it as an attestation to a bigger scope, depending on the use case of the different applications. Going back to getting more involved with Manna, is there was some really challenging days there for a while, especially 2019 and 2020, and we weren't sure if we were gonna weather through the storm. We didn't know if we would make it on the other side alive. So we basically went in dormant mode, and we are so grateful to have made it, and we're there now, and we have the one a day that we and we're grateful for the resources that have helped us along the way. So we do anticipate getting more engagement into the community, and that's why we're sticking our necks back out there. So we're excited on the direction of this. So yeah, thanks for going into the B2 there, Adam, because I know that's been the biggest hurdle and the biggest complaint, but yeah, that's where we're at in the process. So it is not an easy process still. But John, did you have any other questions or comments on that front?
First, I'm going to let Phil, your hand's raised. Phil, can you make any comment that you had
Yeah, I
to
just
add?
want to say one thing. We talked about B2 being slow, and that's certainly true today for people that are outside of it. But as more people have B2, it gets easier and easier for the next real person to get B2. So a whole bunch of people on this call have B2 and really good scores. So people that actually know me can very easily get B2. So as more and more people in various different communities get it, it spreads faster and faster. So this is not an always slow thing. It's a constantly accelerating thing. It shouldn't be hard, right? If you know lots of real people that already have it, then you'll also be able to easily get it. The problem is, how do you get to the point that you know lots of people that already have it?
Yeah. So another community that I thought of that's pretty large is the One Hive community. So unfortunately, every community that I've mentioned, well, almost everyone, because I wouldn't consider Song a Day like really like that. It's sort of nerdy, but it's also got this artistic, music theme to it. So it's like a lot of these are kind of like you have to have an interest in crypto to know people at this point, which is kind of a barrier that we don't want. That shouldn't be the barrier for getting verified. That just happens to be how it is, because that is the community that initially got interested in BrightID. But we're hoping that other communities, non-technical, non-cryptocurrency communities, will get more interested in BrightID, start using BrightID, and that there'll be a whole lot of other options. And it should be it should get to the point where you either are involved in one of those communities or you know someone that's involved in one of those communities. And so you should be able to get B2 verified, and it gets easier with time. And I will say that this is not the only experiment that we're doing. We're running another experiment called Aura that's now in closed beta. So like I have high hopes for Aura as a simpler but even more secure method than B2 for verifying people. So B2 is slow right now. Aura is coming up.
Can you explain, Adam, like why the social graph is such a valuable tool to analyze in Sybil? I think that needs to be clearly digested on why that methodology is important to get this right as we navigate through the different sophisticated attacks that things are evolving in.
Yeah, so the social graph is a really important piece, I think. So maybe to understand why, we can contrast some of the other methods that are being tried. So I'll point out a few interesting ones. So let's look at proof of humanity, the government issued IDs that you mentioned, and also IDINA. So IDINA is saying, let's have this anonymous, basically synchronized meetup with everyone on Earth. But the meetup isn't about like saying, hi, let's get to know each other, kind of like a BrightID meet, or let's get to know about BrightID. Instead, it's saying, let's have everyone solve CAPTCHAs at the same time. And that's how we'll know that they're human. So the nice thing about that, it's anonymous. You don't have to make new friends, because sometimes that's challenging. But the hard part, and the reason why back in the early days, a few years ago, I chose not to go this way, even though this solution did occur to me, even though IDINA didn't exist at the time, it did occur to me that this could be a way to do it. I just thought the long-term vision of this kind of synchronous meetup just didn't seem scalable to me. So I started looking for other solutions. So that's IDINA. So I will say that I encourage anyone who wants to try to solve this problem of unique humanity in a privacy preserving way, in a decentralized way. I encourage them to do it. So then now we go to the government IDs, and aside from what you already mentioned, that it's too centralized, too invasive of our privacy, because they do an overkill they overshoot on collecting data, and that's not good, especially when you're not in control of what they're doing with the data they collect. So that's why we don't like that. But actually it's not very effective, because when we were doing Swift Demand, we tried that. using government IDs. And we found that the same group of Sybil attackers showed up, and they had lots of government IDs already. They had a way of faking that system. And so because the issuance of government IDs and the black market for government IDs is kind of this closed thing that you can't analyze it, because it happens behind the wall of the government, and you don't, like, nobody knows for sure what's happening there. It's not wide open. You have to be, only like the people who work in or audit the government systems know what's happening there. We don't know where the failures are, and we can't fix the failures. And so it feels like we're relying on the governments to do the right thing. It kind of puts the most important piece of verifying people out of our hands. And I don't like that feeling. And I don't like waiting for governments to make it cheap and easy for their citizens to get IDs. I don't like, relying on them to do it the right way. I don't like relying on different governments to figure out how to federate and share their information with each other. I just don't, I don't want to have to, leave that in their court. So that's why I don't like the KYC method. And then as far as proof of humanity is really interesting. You have to get people to vouch for you. So in that way, it's similar to BrightID, and it does inherently have this social thing. It requires staking. It requires everybody to put up some money, especially the people that are vouching for other people to put up money. And I'm okay with people that are vouching maybe to put something at stake. I think that's fine. That's actually a good thing. It's probably limiting, it's probably the main thing that's limiting Sybils within the proof of humanity network. So that part's good. But I've talked to Santi before about the public registry. I don't feel like that's the solution, because I don't feel like an AI is going to search through that public registry and find duplicates. I don't feel like any human is going to be equipped to do that. It's got to be the only way that we can fight Sybils is through the people that we actually know. We can't do it for anonymous or not anonymous. We can't do it for people that we, searching through a registry of people that we don't actually know. We can't rely on something like, well, let me check the Twitter and see if it looks legit. They seem like a normal, they seem like, a real person. I looked at their Twitter account. They seem like a real person. Or I looked at their face or the video they made. They seem like a real person. That doesn't work, because they could have duplicates that you don't know about. So that's not the method that we're going for. Although, like I said, I encourage all these projects to keep going to try to solve these problems that they have. And we'll try to solve the problems that we have. But I think ultimately whatever solution ends up being the solution is going to have a social network aspect to it. And that's what we're focusing on with BrightID. So if we can build it, if we can show the world like this is the way to do it, and so that they can use our social network piece to solve Sybil attacks, that's exactly what we're going for in BrightID. So that we're going to continue doing that. We're doing that with B2. We did that with Meets, although Meets kind of felt like a step backwards, because it was saying, okay, just come and meet with this person that you don't actually know and you'll get verified. So that felt like a step backwards. Now we're doing B2, which feels more like the real way that we want to do it. Aura is the upcoming one, which is, to me, it's like the vision of how it should work. And this is not a call about Aura. We can explain how that works in the future, but I could very much see Mana switching over to Aura in a couple months and using that as the verification method. And perhaps that'll make things easier for a lot of people. So we'll see how that all works. But you do have a question in the chat if one of you wants to field that question. And I'm also happy to answer that question.
Which question are you looking at?
Okay, so I saw a couple of questions from Granny Crypto. Maybe I'll let you handle the first one, which is basically saying, I've already earned Mana over the last 2 to 3 years why can't I get those automatically? And then use your new process to get new ones. So old user had a stash of mana. Why can't they have access to those?
Yeah, the reason being is there needs to be, you know, the value you held in that old mana blockchain and account is connected to that. And in order to prove that's yours, we have to go through specific steps in order for you to access it. So the new mana setup is using your BrightID and connecting that to your MetaMask. Our old Mannabase setup was entirely different. It was on a different blockchain. So to bridge between those two, there's separate steps that are required to claim and convert that old mana into the new mana 2.0.
Yeah, all of those steps are actually functional, like if you had an email, you verify you own that email, and then you roll over the root reducted value over to the new chain. Some users are having, which BrightID is solving actually, and I think is that some users had multiple Mannabase accounts and now they can't link all of them because the BrightID. So that's actually BrightID doing its job, which is good. And then also then the paper wallet and the QT wallets, that is a functional process. And we have steps that we're going to publish out once we like in the near term. So yeah. And then what was the second part of the question?
Okay, so well, let's go to the second part. This has to do with Granny Crypto saying, I'm into crypto. I'm in this huge club with 100,000 members. I teach a Bitcoin class,
Nice.
but I still, I guess I don't know the right people or something because I'm still don't have B2 verification. So what I would say about that is, I think things will happen. Like things will kind of unfold. Right now it's a slow process, but I think things will unfold to connect these communities. One thing that I'm really excited for is I think once John and Brandon give us the go ahead and say that the process is smooth enough, we're going to start pitching mana to BrightID users and telling them, hey, come check out mana, come collect your mana. If you like, a lot of our users already have B2 verification. So we're going to say, hey, come over to mana. If you already have it, you can start collecting mana. And that should bring a bunch of new people in there that other people can get to know. Maybe there can be like mana community activities to build like kinship around the mana community especially in different geographical locations. Yeah. So maybe like shared interests. And then, so you're going to have like a much larger core of people that are mana users that already have B2 verification once that happens.
So I have something to add there. So why we made it B2.5 and made people mad, and we apologize. We didn't want to make anyone mad, but hear this out because this is really important. So we went down the path of low friction to get into the space and then like got nailed, right? And the economics and the theory of whatever mana like is on, right, is it gets derailed. Once you have lots of Sibyls claiming a bunch of the tokens and then they send it to one account and the sell pressure just becomes unsustainable. So we know the outcome is failure going down that path. So if you have a low friction, easy access network to participate in, we know the outcome, dead. So then you raise the bar, right, and you make it difficult, and then you get people upset, and so you get possible users just get frustrated and go away. So we're, as a community, trying to find that balance, and that's where we would love to. And you brought up Song a Day, and I think that's where you did actually a BrightID snapshot vote. Like these decisions should be community driven, of like what is that balance that we find, and because we don't want to make that decision long term, because we probably don't know the Hive knowledge base is going to make the best decision for the community. So Anyway, that I wanted to share is that we did it on purpose, so the tokenomics don't just get derailed immediately, because once you get those derailed, it becomes really hard to regain credibility and trust. So that's why we made it so high for the 1 a day. And now it's, I think, B2.1 right now for a short amount of time. And then we're gonna, I think we have like an idea of like a progress up that Adam shared. But anyway, that, and John, you had something of like what we need to balance, right, with those users of, you're gonna have, I forgot how you described it, but it might jog your memory. But anyway, I'm done talking. Whoever wants to jump in on that now.
Right. Yeah. Well, ultimately, if it's too difficult and nobody can kind of be those first people who are using it, who are collecting mana, then there isn't enough momentum from like a core group to help spread it and to help inspire other people to join. And so we definitely understand, and we hear everybody who's frustrated because they want to get mana, but they feel like they don't know how to get the proper score. You know, the reason this is here is so mana can fundamentally succeed. And it's, if the trade-off means it's easy for you to get and for everyone to get, but then if the project fails, then it really wasn't worth it. So that being said, we really want to do everything we can to figure out how to connect people in the Mannabase who want to get B2 verified, who want to be a part of this. And B2 it's a fundamentally newer aspect of BrightID. So a lot of it is being tested and worked out now. And so this is why it does require a little more patience, and we're working with BrightID to figure out some of the issues and some of the kinks and some of the ways to work with this. So it is almost a bit of a beta phase to really make this B2 process work well. And because of that, it's not going to be as smooth as it will be down the line. You know, eventually, as all of this grows and progresses, it will be continuously easier to get a score, and now it's a little more challenging, and that's just the nature of the project where it's at. But on the upside, you can be part of something new and something exciting and help us. You know, this challenge we're co-creating this. You know, this is community driven ultimately. Like what Mana is all about is us as a whole community working together to create this value and to create something great. So you know, us as founders, we put a tremendous amount of time into this, and we really believe in this. And I know it can be challenging, but in the end, it's worth it. And it's for a bigger cause and a bigger purpose, and something I think we all believe in. So I appreciate everybody's patience, and as we get through these difficult aspects and make this process as smooth as we can.
Yeah. And so, like you said, B2 is kind of like an experiment that you're now trying. And if, like you said, if something better comes along, that's going to check all the boxes, that is privacy preserving and also keeps the Sybils out. That's like the key thing, because like you said, if it doesn't do that, the whole project fails. And then still allows people like a reasonable path to get it. I think you will switch to whatever works the best. And I'm really excited for Aura coming up. So it could be that, like I said, in a couple months, could be that you weigh the options and you say, okay, we were using B2. Now Aura looks a lot better. Let's try that out. And that's totally fine. That won't be a problem. So I'm going to look at some of these other ones. I see really
real quick.
Yeah.
Two things I want to say on what I
Sure.
said. One is, if Mana were to switch to Aura, any work that people did on B2 is likely to be pretty well rewarded in that system as well. It's not exactly one-to-one, but if you've made the kind of connections that would get you a good B2 score, that's going to work really well to help you also get a good Aura score. So it's not two totally separate process. There's a lot of overlap in the making the right kind of connections And the
Yeah.
other thing I want to say is we keep talking about, hey, there's the social graph and it's privacy preserving, important distinction. So BrightID, because it's pseudonymous, but you can figure out maybe who's who on the graph. But Manna, receiving your B2 score or any other application, has no idea where you are on the social graph. That's really what makes it privacy preserving, is that the applications using BrightID don't know where you are on that social graph.
Right. Yeah. Very good
Yeah.
point.
Just to add, like from someone coming from like these terms, B2, meet, aura, like you probably don't care about all this stuff, right? You just want to get, and I totally understand, because it gets complicated and convoluted that the smart devs work with, but those are just to be like, they're different logarithms that are analyzing the social graph connections, right? And
Yeah, they're different verification methods. And so BrightID can come out with different verification methods. And
Yeah.
Phil made a really good point that any work you do towards getting verified carries over to other verification methods. So if there's another app that comes out in the future that's using Aura, you may find yourself already verified for that one.
Yeah, and that like from growth and scale, like all this should be under the hood, and very much of it should be out like in the normal knowledge base, like is what I think we're aiming for.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
this is all under the hood dialogue going on. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, so our goal is to make it so that any user can basically find an easy path just to become verified for whatever the app is asking for. But to support that, there has to be a group, kind of like an inner core group of people that know more and do more. So the whole Aura system is based around, there's like an inner graph of people that are able to help other people to get verified. And then that inner graph is they're very aware of what's going on. They're very aware of each other. They're very aware of who's getting verified where. And that is where kind of like this Sybil battleground takes place. And so but to 95% of people, they don't need to be aware of what's going on in there. So that's kind of like the goal, the end goal for BrightID. So I want to bring up answer another question. So this is Emmanuel Solomon says hi from G1, the French crypto UBI project. We're friends with Dunator, so it's a very cool project that is giving a social UBI based around a social graph of like people that you really know. So it shares a lot of the kind of like the feeling and the goal of BrightID and Manna. So yeah, we love Dunator, and they're building the web of trust. So and then he asks some questions. He says, they're currently rebuilding the core. I did not know that. Okay. How your engine could be embedded in a foreign system. So BrightID is blockchain agnostic. It doesn't, it can work on any blockchain. It by itself currently uses a blockchain called ID chain just to synchronize between the nodes, but the applications don't have to use ID chain to use it. Most of, or any blockchain at all, in fact. So, so there's that. So, and embedding is simply, so one path for integration is to run BrightID nodes, which we encourage apps to do, just so that we can get greater decentralization. And we actually did have someone from Dunator who tried and was not successful in running a BrightID node. But I would say let's try again, because I think the documentation has improved a little bit, and more people have been successful in running BrightID nodes since then. I think that that you'll have success if you try again. So I would encourage folks from Juniper, anyone who wants to give that a try, run some BrightID nodes. We will certainly help you do that. And but you don't have to. You can integrate with BrightID without running BrightID nodes. What you have to do is then you have to query some BrightID nodes, and we have some dev documentation, and we show how to query the BrightID nodes for information. And like Philip said, it uses identifiers from your own system. It uses a clever method of using blind signatures to allow you to use your own identifiers, so that the BrightID identifiers are never exposed. So you can use whatever identifiers are used in the Juniper G1 system can be used as the identifiers that you query BrightID nodes with. So that's yeah, we can help you with that. I would say come to our Discord, come to our Keybase. Those are great places. If you come to our Discord first, we'll help you find our Keybase where there's more developers, but we have integration channels in both. We have discussions on BrightID nodes in both, and we would love to help you integrate with BrightID. And yeah, I think the social graph is the right way to go. So I think you've got a great start, and it sounds like that you have a lot of the same challenges that we've had with Manna and BrightID, which is that you're trying to like bootstrap this network, and it's slow at the beginning because you want to be careful. You'd rather be slow and careful than fast and break everything. So Juniper's been around for years. They've been slowly growing. I'm very glad to see that they're still growing. I'm happy to see that you can go and use your G1 currency to buy and sell things. I think that's amazing. I love it. So I love what you're doing, and keep it up, and let's work.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's work together. But there's another question here.
Can I hold on?
Yeah, go ahead and jump in, and then I'll answer the other question.
Yeah. For anyone, like there's a lot of UBI projects, universal basic income, like there, and we all know each other and chat with each other, and some perceive things as competition. I find that comical, but I find the cooperative collaboration, like, and that's where I think the crypto community is so beautiful, is that tends to be their mindset. So like I hope all of them can have some success and make some impact on people's lives, because yeah, we all just need to work together though to make that happen. So would love to connect. I'm not I remember Juniper. I don't know if I've ever chatted with anyone on your team, but would love to connect and see how we can collaborate for sure. Cool.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, what you said is exactly right. It's like, and maybe I'll ask you this after I answer the question more about how like different UBI projects can collaborate. But let me answer this other question. Do you use different level of trust, strong, family, colleagues, low, friends of friends? So yeah, that's how Juniper works. The way it works with BrightID, with B2 verification, it's it's kind of like, are you able to pull yourself and your community into the center of the graph? So it's very much having good connections with people that are already B2 verified is important. And then with Aura, the way that it works is it's about having a connection to someone that is like an Aura player, is what we call it. So having a connection with someone who is involved in the anti-Sybil efforts. So we feel that in the future that won't be a problem at all for everybody on Earth to easily find someone that they can connect to get verified. That won't, but right now it very much feels like very similar to Juniper. It's like you have to know someone, and that actually makes it a little challenging. You have to know someone that's already using Juniper. So So yeah, do we have a low like friends of friends, where it's like, okay, I know someone who is B2 verified and therefore I'm B2 verified? Yes, that is kind of how it works. So with B2, there's different scores, the lowest score being 1, and then you can get higher and higher. So a B2 score of 1 is kind of like a friend of friends. It's like you know someone who knows someone who's like close to the center of the graph. And Manna, like they said, recently lowered the B2 score temporarily to 1, just to allow more people to get in. But with the idea that it'll probably be raised back up again. But even getting B2 1 is challenging for a lot of people. And it does require that you actually know people. You can't just go to a BrightID meet and meet someone for the first time. You have to actually know someone. And then the question that I had for you, Brandon and John, is as far as like collaborating with other UBI projects, how do you see UBI playing out in the future? Do you see it being like one UBI token or currency that kind of becomes the winner that everybody collects, or do you see it more like, you know, people are collecting 100 different valuable tokens from like a bunch of different sources that maybe come through, maybe it comes through one app, but it's like a bunch of different sources, and or how do you see that playing out?
That's a really good question. And I do think that, you know, in order for real value to occur within a UBI token, if the economic model is that the value inherently comes from the community as a whole utilizing it. So for example, something like Manna at this stage, the core value is that everybody's getting one, and it's the community and that ecosystem that gets built around that. Now that ecosystem and that value could be a lot of different things. Like from a really simplistic standpoint, you can think, okay, well, what if I had a huge community around the world who's getting one token a day, and I have a high degree of confidence they're unique? What application, what offer, what opportunity can I provide to that community, understanding that those things? Maybe it's, I own a restaurant and I say, okay, I want to give free cup of coffee. Anybody who's got it, who can get to my restaurant, and you know they can scan it for 7 Manna. I know that it's not going to get abused. Maybe it's only available one time for that BrightID user. You know, that's just a simple solution that maybe isn't even relative to the value of Manna. It's more relative to the value of knowing that Manna is finite to that person. Now, then there's all sorts of secondary implications of creating like an economy with other users and creating value. And this has, one of the things that's often talked about with UBI is, well, what about the different cost of living? Everywhere in the world is a different relative cost of living. Even within certain countries, you have massive differences depending on where you are. And how that plays out with different UBI is certainly a really good debate. I don't know what the answer that's going to be. I think with Manna, you can have localized value based on what people in a localized area feel like their value is worth. But then you're going to, of course, have some sort of averaged out value based on what the online communities, if you're sharing something that's digital, it'll probably have just a general relative value. And a lot of this is, it's impossible to determine something that's not, you know, controlled by myself or anyone of what, you know, the value of man is free floating, and it's relative to what people decide it to be worth. So it's kind of impossible to decide if this is going to be like substantial enough to actually provide, you know, for food and living, or if it's just going to be a relatively small amount that, you know, maybe if you pass it along to the right person, then it'll be enough for them to actually have a UBI. The extent or scope of impact of each person getting Manna is hard to say at this stage, but ultimately it's about just creating a token that is of shared value, that everybody's got a kind of equal opportunity to participate in, and that this token is relative to each person. Just every day they get one. It's just as simple as possible. And what that will become is up to all the people getting Manna. It's like, this is not something, it's something we all decide as a community of what that's worth.
Yeah, from my point of view, that is a dang good question, Adam. Did someone ask that, or did that come from you?
No, that's
a
something that I've been thinking about for years, actually, because you
Yeah.
remember we started Open UBI a few years
Yeah.
ago. And so, yeah, because we wanted to figure that out. We wanted to see like what does the world look like where there's a bunch of projects trying to provide value to everyone on Earth, so that we can kind of lift people out of this situation where it's like, okay, you know, I'm on the edge of survival. Like if I don't get my paycheck next week, I don't get to eat or something like that. Like we want to lift people out of that situation.
Yeah. Like, cause I think about that all the time when I just get refocused in this. Cause part of me's like, I love all the different ideas that are trying to go, but I have my skepticism and critiques that I would also have to them. And we won't go in on those. But I wouldn't know the information that I have if I didn't go through this process. You know, like I've learned so much along the way of what works, what doesn't work, and we're gonna continue to learn. I do wish we didn't dilute the amount of effort and resources that has happened with all the different projects. I do think that's hindered, because if we all focused when we were in Open UBI, I think we would be way further. And I look at this as like, if I saw the right thing, I would drop everything and put my backing behind that. But I haven't seen that, and that's why the heck we're doing this. You know, so each one has their own unique challenges. So I think it's going to be pruned pretty heavily. I think the whole crypto community, and I know I'm talking in disagreement with even some of our core team. Like I see a big pruning of tokens and projects in this crypto space, but the winners that do persevere and come out alive through this are going to be giants, and they're going to make huge impacts in people's lives, and it already has. Anyway, that's my view.
Yeah, and just to add to that, just if a project is distributing out tokens and its economic model is not based, if it's like we have a certain big pool of resources, we're going to fund this and just distribute it out. Maybe it's a stable coin, whatever it is, and maybe somebody's getting a couple different programs that they have, then yeah, I could see that happening. Maybe they're getting some from their government, maybe they're getting some from some global some global organization, and then maybe they're getting some through something like Mano or Proof of Humanity. But probably within each of these sectors, you're going to have at least a handful of winners. And part of that's going to be because of, maybe it'll be a couple different ones geographically located. Here I'm in Southeast Asia. I'll give you an example. You have driving apps. Grab is the main app people use to get a ride. In the United States, it's Uber and Lyft. Here, WhatsApp and Telegram are the primary communication channels. In China, it's WeChat. So you might have a few major options, but when you're talking about, I think, a global stream of value, it becomes much less efficient if people aren't working in the same streams. And I think you can have a few streams, but once you get many, many different ones, you probably won't have the same impact on a global scale. So I tend to agree with Brandon that I think you'll get pruned down. There, of course, will still be these small communities and smaller community projects, but I think to achieve the kind of scale of global impact, it can't be done with a massive number. It'll end up probably diminishing the amount of impact that can be made. So that's my guess and my take, but certainly it's hard to say, it's so early on. And I just hope, likewise with Brandon, that, we're kind of all testing different methods and ideas of how this can work with these different projects. And as time goes on, these methods will start to prove as successful or less successful. And I hope that the projects that do come out as the most impactful and quality, that the people who are working on some of these other ones will gravitate towards the projects that are having the most success. And I say that from myself and Brandon. If it's not Manna, then we're happy to help support whatever it is, and vice versa. So I think it's a wonderful question, and I hope the collaboration continues. But I do find it difficult to see a massive number of different UBI projects globally running at the same time.
Yeah, thanks for answering that.
We're getting to the hour. I'm gonna have to depart here, but I just want to say thank you for having us, and thank you for all the hard work that your team provides there, Adam and Phil and the whole core team. So I really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing where all this goes.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Brandon. And I'll see, do either of you have any closing remarks, anything that you feel like didn't get said that you'd like to add?
Well, if you haven't already, I'd encourage you to go to mannabase.com, MANNABASE.com, and sign up, start getting Manna one a day. If you need to get BrightID verified, go to brightid.org, go through that process, get your meets and your B2, and then you'll just need to get a MetaMask, and you'll be able to start claiming. So I'd love anyone listening to participate and help us kind of create this future and see where it goes. Brandon, you have anything to add, or did Brandon have to go?
He had to go. I don't see him here anymore. Yeah, if you're listening to this, if you found us on YouTube, or you're listening in right now, and you've been using BrightID, I encourage you to go try out Manna as an app. You'll find it, a link to it on apps.brightid.org. You can also follow Manna on Twitter. They've got an active Discord. Mannabase.com is where you can go to start collecting your Manna. That process will become, it's going to get smoother and smoother as we go. So, if you fail on your first try again. And yeah, I would love to see lots of BrightID people getting into Manna. And thank you so much, John. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time and everyone else's time today. And like Brandon said, we really love everything BrightID is doing. And we know you're all doing it for the right reasons. Even if sometimes it's difficult for people to go through the process, it's because we're trying to not skip, we're trying not to skip corners and do it right. And sometimes that makes it a little more difficult in the short term. So
yeah, and thank you for being willing to experiment with BrightID, and I hope that our partnership continues, and I hope for great things with Manna, because we love what you're doing. I mean, both Philip and I are big proponents of UBI, so we love that you're working so hard on that. So thank you for all that you do. Thanks everybody for coming, and yeah, we'll see you at our next AMA. Take care, everyone.